Episode 27, The Birth of the Headlight. In 1887, Benz made limited production of the Motorwagen Model 3, which featured improvements over Model 2, including the adoption of wooden wheels, and exhibited it at the Paris Exposition. While in Germany, carriages equipped with petroleum engines were evolving into automobiles, in France, another pioneer would accidentally attach what would become the prototype of the modern electric headlight to a car. In 1887, Count Albert de Dion, a pioneer of the French automobile, found himself needing to depart late at night from Bordeaux, the famous wine region of France, to Paris. As the Count prepared to depart, those around him tried to dissuade him with worried expressions. They warned that driving on dark roads late at night was dangerous and insisted it was unwise to leave now. However, Count de Dion was unconcerned, saying the road was already familiar to him. He believed the moonlight would be bright enough to illuminate the way and laughed off their concerns. In the end, despite their objections, the Count stood firm in his decision and went ahead with his departure. The Count started up his steam-powered automobile called La Marquise, the de Dion Bouton Trépardou. The La Marquise was built for Count de Dion by the French automobile company de Dion Bouton. To briefly explain the French car company, de Dion Bouton, it was a successful French automobile manufacturer in the early 20th century, founded by Albert de Dion and Georges Bouton. They developed a steam-powered car in 1882 and began producing small gasoline cars in 1895. The engines of de Dion Bouton were used by over 150 car companies, and by 1900 the company had produced 400 automobiles and 3,200 engines, making it the largest car manufacturer in the world at the time. In particular, in 1910, they became the first to mass-produce a V8 engine and created the torpedo car, the world's first best-selling automobile. Count de Dion, one of the founders of this remarkable company, began burning coal in the boiler of La Marquise to start the vehicle. La Marquise required burning paper, wood, or coal for about 30 minutes to generate enough steam to start the engine. In other words, it took a full 30 minutes of heating the boiler just to start the car. After generating sufficient steam over 30 minutes, the Count departed from Bordeaux and began driving La Marquise at its top speed, given the late hour. However, as he had a long distance to cover, Count de Dion ended up spending the night on a vineyard road. In 1865, Britain's Queen Victoria issued the world's first automobile traffic law, known as the Red Flag Act, which required cars to carry a lamp from 1 hour before sunset to 1 hour after sunrise for safe night driving. However, Count de Dion was French, and therefore his La Marquise had no equipment for lighting. At that moment, the moon in the sky was obscured by clouds, and on the deserted road, the Count stood helplessly beside his La Marquise. As he panicked, unable to distinguish the road in the pitch-black countryside of Bordeaux, a distant light began approaching him. At first, in the dark night, the Count mistook the flickering light for a will-o'-the-wisp and trembled with fear. But as time passed, he was relieved to see that it was a farmer walking toward him with a kerosene lamp. The Count was glad to encounter a farmer on such a desolate road. He shouted for help in his difficult situation. The farmer saw the gentleman standing in the middle of the road and immediately sensed that he was in trouble. Approaching to assess the situation, the farmer looked at the gentleman with concern. The Count explained that while driving his steam car, The moon suddenly disappeared behind clouds, leaving him completely unable to see the road. He wore a troubled expression as he asked to be guided to the nearest inn. The farmer understood the situation and willingly offered to help. He added that on such a late, deserted country road, anything could have happened, so the Count was lucky to have met him. He then took the lead, guiding the Count's La Marquise with a kerosene lamp. Thus, the Count was able to safely reach a nearby inn with the farmer's guidance. Afterward, the Count attached a light to the front of his car and called it a headlamp. This can be considered the very first headlight. 3 years after this incident involving the Count, in 1890, the first electric light with similar functions as today's headlights was installed by the Columbia Automobile Company in New York, which sold electric cars. Though electric lights provided better visibility for night driving, the cars using them were weighed down by batteries as heavy as the vehicles themselves, making them slow and eventually losing favor to faster, stronger petroleum cars, so electric lights were not widely adopted. Then in the early 1910s, with the invention of battery-powered starters, battery research began to progress. As batteries became smaller and more powerful, they soon became essential components in cars, and electric lights finally became widespread. However, early bulbs had such weak luminous intensity that a single headlight was as large as a wash basin. As a side note, a feature now seen in luxury vehicles, headlights that pivot in the direction of a turn was already developed and commercialized by Henry Ford in 1921. Ford installed pivoting headlights that turned with the front wheels in his cars, which gained popularity, but due to technical flaws, they were not widely used.